You don't understand the game, Trudy hissed. The ones sitting high always see who's climbing the wrong ladder. That was the moment Alara knew she was being watched. Not seen, watched. Her name twisted, her story erased, her silence bought with suspicion. But what if the girl they ignored was the only one who remembered the truth? Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Ilara wiped the bar with a damp cloth, folded it once, and set it aside. Across the floor came a mix of footsteps, heels, loafers, boots polished too clean for real work. Her sneakers squeaked once, then went quiet. Dinner hour always carried the same rhythm, cutlery clattering, buttered fish and wine in the air, and that instant hush when someone important walked in. She could always tell who mattered. The host straightened his tie. A table adjusted their posture. Ilara stirred lemons into pitchers, pretending her faded name tag still shone. A couple waved her over, but before she reached them, a man at the next table lifted his hand, not to call, but to stop her. "We're waiting for someone else," he said with a smile that never softened. "Someone who knows the wine list." She didn't argue, didn't explain she'd memorized the list weeks ago. From across the room, the manager noticed and didn't blink. Her hands shook as she reached for a glass she didn't need. A crack split her thumbnail, catching on her apron. She picked at it, remembering the day her mother collapsed in a grocery store while strangers stepped over her like spilled milk. The ice machine rattled. A busboy laughed too loud. She heard none of it. Later, stepping into the salt-heavy night, she leaned against the brick wall, head tipped back, eyes closed. Footsteps scraped behind her. She turned. The drunk from earlier stood swaying beneath the buzzing alley light, rain dripping from his collar face, pale as wax, eyes glassy and unfocused. "I know you," he slurred. "Emily Wright." He blinked again, words tumbling out as though her face belonged to someone else. "I told Emery to wait." Ilara caught his elbow before he fell, bracing him more from instinct than choice. His breath reeked of scotch, his weight collapsing against her shoulder like an unwanted coat. "You're not supposed to be out here," she said quietly. "Let's get you inside." He didn't argue, only mumbled again about Emery and let her guide him toward the service door. The hallway beyond yawned wide and polished, the kind of clean that seemed to reject fingerprints. She paused at the threshold. The training manual had been clear, highlighted in yellow on handling intoxicated VIPs, no physical contact call, security file, or report. But no page covered a man shivering, slurring, and seconds from collapsing. The back elevator chimed once, doors sighing open as if complicit. Ilara pressed the 10th floor button, watching each number glow while he sagged against the mirrored wall, eyes half-closed, lips shaping words that never reached sound. At the end of the hall, she found his suite. Rummaging through his coat, her fingers brushed the cold chain of a watch before closing on a room card tucked behind a business card stamped with a stranger's name. The room carried traces of cigars and leather polish. He sank onto the edge of the bed, tugged at a shoelace, then abandoned the effort and stared at the carpet. "I didn't mean to leave her," he muttered, voice splintering like old timber. "But Emery always leaves first." Ilara didn't pry. She draped a throw blanket over him, left the nightstand lamp glowing, and slipped toward the door. The quiet broke with a sharp voice. "You out of your mind?" Ginevra stood at the far end of the corridor, arms folded across her scrub top, hair twisted in a messy knot. "He was barely standing," Ilara answered. "And now he's in bed in a luxury suite with no witnesses, and you broke 2 protocols to put him there." Ilara rubbed the heel of her palm against her temple. "I couldn't leave him like that." Ginevra moved closer, tone lower. "You think anyone cares why you could have called security, concierge, cleaning staff? Instead, you carried him yourself. That's not compassion here, it's career suicide." They stayed silent until they reached the apartment. The door creaked like always. The place smelled of reheated pasta and lavender cleaner. Ginevra went straight to the fridge. Ilara dropped her bag, peeled off her damp sweater, and sank cross-legged into the worn couch. The notification arrived 5 minutes later. Anonymous user uploaded a video caption. "Guess the waitress got a promotion." On screen, her arms circled Callum's back, his head slumped toward her shoulder. The angle caught just enough to twist the moment into something suggestive. Her stomach clenched. "Where the hell did that come from?" Ginevra demanded. "I don't know. Could have been staff, guest, even security. They'll believe whatever suits them. That's the rule. Another buzz. Administrative leave. Effective immediately. Investigation pending. Her hands dropped phone heavy in her lap. Ginevra settled across from her, sipping from a plastic cup. They'll spin it however they want. Say you were chasing something. I was just trying to help. That's not the story people buy. The clock ticked unevenly. The fridge motor hummed low and relentless. Alara crossed to the fridge, sliding the schedule free from beneath a chipped cactus magnet. Thursday's shift was circled in blue 6 p.m. Her name still appeared in bold caps. She didn't tear it, didn't fold it, just pressed the page flat on the counter, as if keeping it whole might persuade them to do the same. The paper stayed beneath her palm, her name unbroken, bold and whole. By morning, her boots left damp marks on the marble as she crossed the lobby. Under the overhang, she paused, watching the doorman greet a couple in tailored coats, their laughter clipped and careful. Each step she took through the doors seemed louder than the last. At the reception desk, her posture carried the kind of caution that said she wasn't here to demand anything. The woman behind the counter barely glanced up. "I'm here to speak with Mr. Leary. Your name, Alara Whitley." The receptionist's eyes flicked to her monitor, then back. "He's not available for meetings. I just need 2 minutes." "I'm sorry. You'll have to wait until HR contacts you. I was trying to help him. I didn't know someone was recording. That's not something I can discuss with you." Her grip tightened on the strap of her bag. "I worked here for 14 months. And right now," the woman replied, voice soft but final, "you're not on the schedule." Security arrived before Alara had time to argue. She didn't resist, just nodded and walked out, letting the automatic doors close behind her like punctuation. The wind had picked up. Alara crossed the parking lot without looking back, slipped around the corner, and entered through the service door left ajar. No cameras here. She still remembered every blind spot. The break room was unchanged, plastic chairs, the stale odor of burnt coffee, a bulletin board crowded with expired coupons, and a faded karaoke flyer. She dropped into the corner seat, fingers tugging at the frayed edge of her tote bag. Across from her, the old vending machine blinked the same out of order it had for months. Footsteps came before a voice. "Jesus, Alara." Ginevra filled the doorway, Scrub's wrinkled dark hair tied in a messy knot, like she hadn't been home yet. "I didn't know where else to go," Alara murmured. So trespassing sounded smart. "They won't listen to me." "Of course not." Ginevra rubbed her temple, leaning against the frame. "He's a billionaire. You're not." "I just wanted to explain that I didn't do anything wrong." At the water cooler, Ginevra filled a paper cup. "You still think that matters? I thought this place had rules." A dry laugh. "It does. They just don't apply to you." The fluorescent tubes hummed overhead. Alara twisted the bag strap around her fingers like it might hold her together. Later, back at the apartment, Ginevra tossed her keys onto the table and kicked off her shoes. Alara lingered by the door jacket, still on shoulders hunched. "You okay?" Ginevra asked without looking. "No." Crossing the room, she sank onto the floor near the heater and pulled out 2 cups of instant noodles. "Dinner of champions," she muttered, filling them with boiling water. Alara stayed still until Ginevra handed her a cup, steam fogging the narrow space between them. "I told you. You help someone like that, and you become part of their story, just not in the way you think. I didn't even know his name until afterward." "Doesn't matter." Her hand trembled as she stirred a few drops, spotting her jeans. "If I don't get paid this week, I won't make rent." Ginevra exhaled through her nose. "Then you'll have to move. Carly's asking about the room again?" The silence pressed so heavy it made the fridge hum, feel like thunder. "I just wanted them to know I wasn't trying to." "No one needs your explanation, Alara." Ginevra's voice stayed even, but the words landed like stone. "You're too good for this place. That's the problem. You keep expecting it to act like it deserves you." Alara unlocked her phone without thinking. One unread message blinked at the top of the screen from an unknown number. "I remember what happened that night. I owe you a thank you." She stared for a long time, didn't reply, didn't show Ginevra. Steam curled from her cup. The noodles had turned to mush. On her phone, the message still sat at the top of the screen. "Would you meet me for lunch tomorrow noon? Hotel Marcliffe. CD." No emojis, no apologies, just the clipped certainty of someone used to giving orders that sounded like invitations. Ilara stared at the message while the kettle hissed. She hadn't told Ginevra, though. The hush in their apartment had grown so thick, it felt like even secrets left echoes. Her mug cooled untouched steam, curling upward and fading before it touched her face. Ginevra dried her hands on her scrubs and tossed the towel onto a chair. You don't owe him anything, and you definitely don't need to hear whatever version of the truth he thinks he's invented in that penthouse brain of his. Ilara lowered her eyes to the phone again. What if he just wants to talk? He's a billionaire. They don't just do anything. The words hung between them. Ginevra left with a muttered reminder to lock up. By noon, Ilara stood at the entrance of the restaurant tucked beneath the Marcliffe Tower. A valet pulled open the glass door and her heart hammered, as if she'd slipped into some place sacred. The maitre d' didn't ask for her name, just nodded and guided her across polished floors past diners murmuring over oysters and napkins, folded like origami. Callum Drexler waited at a window table jacket draped over his chair sleeves, rolled to reveal the glint of a heavy gold watch. Each small movement caught the light. When she approached, he rose, and the courtesy startled her more than anything. Ilara, he said. His tone wasn't warm, but it was clear, free of the haze from that night. She inclined her head. Mr. Drexler. Callum, he corrected. She stayed standing. Why am I here? You got my message. I don't want money. Good, he replied, lowering back into his chair and motioning for her to sit. I'm not offering any. She took the seat opposite, spine-rigid hands flat in her lap. I don't remember much from that night, he admitted, but I know I didn't wake up on a sidewalk or in a hospital, and I know I didn't get there on my own. You don't have to thank me, she cut in quickly. I do, actually. A waiter appeared with menus, but Callum waved him away. We won't be eating. Her silence stretched. There's a management track program, he said. One of the smaller hotels in Sausalito. I've already made the call. Her mouth opened, then closed again. It isn't charity, it's recognition. Why me? Because everyone else walked away. You didn't. She leaned back slightly. That doesn't mean I want to work for you, he shrugged. That's your choice. From his pocket, he drew a black card holder and slid a thick, gold-embossed card across the table. If you want it, tell them I sent you. She left it untouched. Callum pocketed the holder, buttoned his jacket, and offered only good luck, Ilara. Then he walked out, leaving her with the untouched glass of water and questions humming louder than her pulse. Instead of heading home, she wandered for nearly an hour past tourists, snapping photos at fountains, women in tailored coats, walking dogs in sweaters. When she finally opened the apartment door, the kitchen was dark but smelled faintly of ginger and soap. On the counter sat a packet of instant noodles and a scrap of notebook paper scrawled in Ginevra's impatient block letters. Do it, dummy. Opportunities don't come back around. A laugh escaped her, thin, not quite joy, but lighter than the weight she'd been carrying all week. She switched on the kitchen light, sat at the table, and lifted the business card. The gold M at the top shimmered beneath the bulb, catching in the crease of her thumb. She didn't turn it over, didn't move, just sat with it, the silence warming around her as the card grew hot against her palm. Days later, a shuttle carried her north. Through the window, Sausalito's shoreline appeared under a low marine layer, the Marcliffe's glass facade rising pale and ghost-like against the fog. Ilara stepped off the shuttle with her name tag swinging from her collar, drawing a breath that barely touched her lungs. A new hotel, a new uniform, a new maze of room numbers to memorize, yet the knot in her chest followed. The Marcliffe here was sleeker, more private, a retreat for guests who preferred not to be seen. Even the breeze felt curated lavender and eucalyptus braided into the salt air. Trudy Halbert appeared at HR as if she'd been waiting for the chance to smile without warmth. Her blazer too precise, her heels striking the floor too sharply. You're the one from Monterey, aren't you? She asked, tilting her head. Mr. Drexler's referral. Ilara offered a hand. Trudy ignored it. You'll shadow concierge and check in first. Start slow. Stay silent. Our clientele doesn't care for explanations. A pause bitter at the edges. And just to be clear, we don't need kindness. We need results. She pivoted away before Ilara could respond. By midweek, routine had settled like fog. Codes for room service billing, keycard programming, the art of smiling without showing teeth. Most staff barely noticed her, though a bellhop nodded politely in passing, and a housekeeper named Naomi slipped an extra muffin by the espresso machine. The whispers started Thursday. "She's the one," someone muttered near the lockers. The waitress who walked him to his room. Ilara kept her face neutral as though nothing reached her. That afternoon came the mistake. A reservation for Mr. Denning was moved up 20 minutes, and in her rush to adjust, she mistyped the suite code. He landed in a single without a view instead of the terrace suite. His complaint sliced through the lobby like a snapped violin string. By the time Trudy arrived, 2 managers and a shaken desk agent had already tried to calm him. Office. Now. The hallway to the back offices stretched longer than she remembered. Carpet swallowed her footsteps, but her pulse filled the quiet. Behind closed blinds, Trudy stood with fingers, laced nails the color of dried blood. "I'm not sure what Mr. Drexler saw in you," she began. "So far, all I see is another girl who got attention for the wrong reasons." "I mixed up one code," Ilara murmured. "I fixed it within." "That's not the point." The voice was sugar over iron. "We don't deal in apologies here. No grace, only accuracy. Since you seem to be struggling, I've arranged something that might help." She pressed a button on a shelf and a flat screen flickered alive. A red dot glowed in the corner. "We'll be reviewing your front desk interactions for the next few weeks. Nothing personal, just quality assurance. You're recording me." "We record everyone," Trudy lied smoothly, some more than others. Back on the main floor, the stairs carried less pretense. No muffin from Naomi. No nod from the bellhop. Her name, whispered behind carts and curtains, turned brittle in other mouths. That night she lingered, restocking towels and minibar keys. The linen room offered a brief refuge, the scent of detergent, the hum of the dryer, warmth wrapping around her like a blanket she couldn't afford. Reaching behind a stack of monogrammed towels, her fingers brushed something stiff canvas. She pulled free a bag wedged behind unopened bedding and found paperwork bound too neatly to be forgotten. The first document bore the Drexler Hospitality Holdings header, a transfer authorization, internal restructuring of management rights. At the bottom, Callum Drexler's name sat typed centered, but the signature below was wrong. Too neat, too deliberate, the loops sharp and unmistakably feminine. Trudy Halberd. Ilara snapped the folder shut and slid it into her bag breath, quickening as though someone might step through the door before she escaped. The folder didn't leave her lap the entire way home. Even when the bus jolted over potholes or braked too sharply at red lights, she clutched it tight, arms crossed like a shield. Back at the apartment, she laid the pages across the table and forced herself to look closer. Another document waited beneath the finance summaries, a registration form for a new LLC. Halberd Acquisitions. Managing Officer T. Halberd. The knot in her stomach pulled tighter. Dropping into a chair, she opened her laptop and typed combinations of names into search bars. Headlines, corporate filings, professional profiles. Each click wove a pattern that looked less like coincidence and more like a web no one was meant to notice. 15 minutes later, she stopped. Not because the search was done, but because she had seen enough. Trudy wasn't just running the hotel. She was shifting its authority piece by piece into her own hands, one signature at a time. Ilara leaned back, pulse tapping against her collarbone. If her reading was right, this wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. But if she was wrong, her phone vibrated, startling her. The screen lit with a name she hadn't seen in days. Ginevra. She hesitated, then answered. "You alive?" Ginevra's voice cracked through, sharp but worn. "Yeah, you sound like you've seen a ghost." "Worse. Talk to me." "I found documents in storage. Trudy's been reassigning ownership to a shell company, her shell company, using forged signatures." Silence stretched. "You sure I compared them?" "Not Callum's. Too clean. Too careful." "Jesus," the whisper rasped through the line. "That's bigger than some HR slap. I don't know what to do." Ginevra's tone dropped lower, steadier. "I know someone. Corporate fraud. You send me the files, I'll push them to him." Quietly. Ilara stared at the screen. "You think I should? If you don't, she gets away with it, and no one ever knows. I could get sued. Slander. Theft. They'll call it whatever they want. Then don't get caught. That's not funny." "No. But it's true." The call hummed with static. Then Ginevra added, "You can still walk away, Elle. Nobody's chaining you here." Ilara said nothing. "But don't walk away and end up bitter behind another bar. Don't complain when they keep calling you by the wrong name, treating you like you're no one worth listening to. The line clicked dead. On the screen waited the draft of an email. Subject line, urgent documents attached. The body was short, clinical. She had rewritten it 3 times already, trimming away every word that hinted at doubt. Her trackpad scrolled back through the PDFs. Each file stared back like a locked door. Maybe they weren't enough, but they were something. The cursor blinked at the end of her last sentence. A faint reflection from the screen shimmered against her forearm. Headlights beyond the window scattered gold across the floor. Her finger hovered over send. She held her breath, not out of fear, but to steady herself, and pressed. The email shot into the dark, and for the first time all week, the weight shifted from her chest to her hands. The next day, a clipboard became her shield. Carrying it gave her license to wander through the purchasing office, past linen storage, into maintenance logs she had no reason to touch. Staff assumed she was on a task for management. She let them. Notes piled slowly, supplier names, invoice dates, item codes. On their own, nothing unusual. But patterns began to show. Orders for tech equipment that never arrived. Shipments marked fulfilled that no one remembered receiving. A line item for a secure key installation signed by Trudy, yet no record of the vendor who performed it. In the break room, a junior tech named Mason dropped into the seat across from her, chewing on a bagel without concern for crumbs. "You work front desk, right?" he asked between bites. "Training," she replied. "Just covering inventory this week." "Cool. Weird how no one gets in the basement anymore." Her pen kept moving. "There's a basement," Mason shrugged. "Storage. Old HVAC file cabinets. I used to go down there when I first started. Then they rekeyed it. Now only Trudy has the fob." He licked cream cheese from his thumb. "She doesn't even let engineers in unless she's there." "Why?" he smirked. "Beats me. Maybe she's building a vault for all those secrets she's hiding." Ilara gave a polite laugh, but her thoughts were already racing. That afternoon, she requested access to audit linen supplies on the lower level. The duty manager, flustered barely 2 days in, handed her the master key ring without checking logs. She descended slowly. 3 floors down, a fan rattling somewhere in the concrete. The basement door resisted, then gave way with a reluctant groan. Lights flickered on after a pause, revealing a corridor that smelled faintly of ash and mildew. Abandoned carts leaned near a collapsed shelf. To her left, one room showed scorch marks on the linoleum. She crossed the threshold. On the floor lay half-burned folders, corners blackened, contents fused into brittle curls. She crouched, fingers hovering above the wreckage. One page hadn't burned through, a signature in blue ink peeked out beneath the soot. She reached for it. Footsteps echoed behind her. Straightening too quickly, she spun. Trudy stood at the doorway, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched with theatrical amusement. "I'm told you're very observant," she said lightly. "Is that what they're teaching in concierge training?" "Now I was asked to check stock levels," Ilara answered, voice-neutral clipboard, tight in her grip before her hand stopped shaking. "Oh, of course. Inventory. Such an admirable work ethic." Trudy stepped farther into the room, letting the door creak shut. Her heels clicked once on the concrete, then stilled. "Curiosity is useful, until it's not." Ilara met her gaze, offered no reply. Trudy smiled. "Be sure not to let your interest wander too far, dear. It would be unfortunate to lose your focus." With that, the door creaked open and shut again, her heels fading down the hall. Back upstairs, the walls seemed thinner. Conversations blurred together. Every light felt too bright, every door slammed too loud. Keys returned, a quick nod to the manager, and Ilara made her way to the staff quarters. In her room, a bag dropped onto the floor, and a jacket that still smelled of smoke slid from her shoulders. The laptop came open, almost by habit, just to record notes. Instead, a notification blinked at the top of the screen. One new message: assistant to Callum Drexler. "Mr. Drexler would like to meet. Are you available this week?" Ilara stared, cursor drifting toward reply, the refrigerator's hum stretching out the pause between decisions. The next morning, the receptionist didn't look up when she gave her name. Typing clattered on each keystroke, like distant hail against glass. Ilara Whitley. "I have a meeting with Mr. Drexler." His fingers froze. Eyes lifted, unreadable. "Mr. Drexler is traveling today. Left early. You're not on the schedule." Her chest tightened beneath her coat. He sent a message. His assistant. "Yes." But no meetings were confirmed. He cut in gently, already shifting his focus back to the monitor. You can leave your information. I'll make sure it reaches him. A beat passed before Alara nodded, lips pressed tight. She turned, walked through the echoing marble of the Drexler and Halbert building, and stepped out into the wet gray stretch of Market Street. Traffic-crawled horns snapped, a puddle soaked through her boot as she crossed the curb. Ducking into a corner cafe, she ordered tea and left it untouched. Through the window, she noticed a car idling across the street, the same silver sedan that had lingered behind her since Van Ness. Coincidence, she told herself. Once, then again. On the bus ride back to Sausalito, she shifted constantly, unable to settle. Every time her eyes flicked to the glass, headlights trailed too long behind. By the time she reached the hotel, nerves stretched taut, each footstep down the hall echoing like it rattled the walls. Her keycard blinked red on the first try, green on the second. The door clicked open. The room was wreckage. Dresser drawers half open, suitcase unzipped and rifled through. The laptop missing, charger still dangling. Her notepad gone. No forced entry. She stood in the doorway, frozen. Closed it slowly, then marched to the front desk. Security arrived 15 minutes later. Nothing's been reported, said the older guard. You sure you didn't leave the door unlocked? I locked it. I always lock it. He didn't write anything down, just traded a glance with the younger one, shifting on his feet. Let me check the logs. They led her into the security office, a cramped room behind the staff elevators crowded with humming monitors. After 10 minutes of rewinding, he turned. No entries on your floor. No badge scans except yours. That can't be right, her voice nearly cracked. What about the hallway cameras, he pointed. No movement outside your room between 2:11 and 6:08 p.m. No one in or out. There's nobody out there, Ms. Whitley. The words struck harder than they should. Back in her room, she locked the door with deliberate shaking fingers, checked the closet, looked under the bed, sat on the floor, knees to chest as the walls tilted faintly around her. Maybe the car was in her head. Maybe the laptop was still at Ginevra's. Or maybe she was slipping. She rose, ran cold water in the bathroom. Splash after splash did nothing to calm her pulse. The faucet shut. Leaning toward the mirror, she wiped away the thin fog clinging to its edges. There it was, letters traced by someone's fingertip, written in the steam of her own breath. Stop digging. Moisture gathered, again blurring the message. She stumbled back, nearly knocking the towel rack loose. A drop slid down her cheek, not from tears. The air had turned icy without warning. Her phone screen stayed black, battery drained. She pulled the curtain aside. The lot stretched empty under sodium lights buzzing over rows of silent cars. No movement, no sedan. But on the mirror, the warning clung like a handprint left in a dream. Vinyl clung to the backs of her legs despite the chill. Ilara shifted, restless, steadying her breath while the diner's air thickened with fried grease and cigarette ghosts pressed into decades-old wallpaper. Across from her, Ginevra stirred sugar into her coffee with a spoon too loud for comfort. Relax, she muttered. He's always late. The clock over the door read 11:17 when the bells jingled and a man stepped in. Walter Deems looked more bait shop than corporate whistleblower. A windbreaker, long unwashed, a baseball cap low over his brow boots that sounded deliberate against tile. His gaze, though, was sharp, taut as wire. Ginevra waved him over. He slid into the booth without ceremony, nodded at Ilara, then drew a folded paper from his coat and set it on the table, like it weighed too much. Name's Walter. Used to run Drexler's security, till they decided suits were better than eyes. He tapped the fax. This is what you're looking for. Ilara studied the page. At first glance, just another legal document, clean header, tidy formatting. But near the bottom, where Callum's signature should have been, was empty space. Below it, a scrawl she recognized instantly. Trudy is not to access or act on behalf of any Drexler Holdings property during my absence. The handwriting matched the thank you note Callum had left in her locker weeks ago. You're sure this is real, she whispered. Walter nodded. Faxed it myself from the cabin. Kept the copy because I knew she wouldn't play clean. Callum was sick, not stupid. He told me to sit on everything till he got back. But the hotel records forged. Trudy's got legal bent to her will. Paperwork shuffled like a card trick. Ginevra leaned in. If we bring this forward, she's the one on the chopping block. Ilara blinked, pulse louder than the silverware around them. Why are you helping me? Walter shrugged. Because the last decent person in that building got buried under HR paperwork and left with a box of desk plants. You helped Callum when no one else did. That matters. The facts crackled in her trembling hands, rippling the coffee in her cup. Ginevra slid her phone across. Take photos, don't lose that. Not even to me. Ilara angled the page toward the window light, one shot, then another. A third slower zoomed on the note at the bottom. The T in Trudy pressed deep into the page, Callum's emphasis unmistakable. Walter sipped his coffee like the world wasn't burning. If I were you, I'd make more than copies. That's the only line standing between her and everything he built. Ginevra's fingers tapped her cup. Go public and she'll come at you harder than ever. Think she was bad before this is nuclear. I'm not going public, Ilara said, eyes locked on the page. I just want him to have the truth before someone erases it. Walter nodded solemn. Then don't waste time. The wind flung leaves against the window. Ilara caught her reflection in the glass pale-faced lips, pressed tight eyes darker than she remembered. The woman staring back didn't look familiar. Maybe that was good. Ginevra slid over a flash drive. Backup for the backup. Walter scanned it last week. Ilara pushed it deep into her coat, metal cold against her ribs. One last glance at the facts, everything she needed was on that page. Everything Trudy couldn't afford to surface. A waitress dropped the check without asking. No one touched it right away. Ilara folded the facts, slipped it into her bag, then stood. Her legs held steady this time. For the first time since Monterey, she didn't feel like she was groping in the dark. The bell above the door rang once as she stepped into the wind. Beneath the glass awning of the executive building, Ilara paused, the breeze tugging at her coat as her reflection stared back from the mirrored entrance. Security buzzed her through without a glance, though each step toward the elevator twisted her stomach tighter. The facts in her bag burned like contraband. The lift whispered upward, mirrored walls stretching her features into something leaner, sharper. She barely recognized the face staring back. On the 12th floor, a young man greeted her, Callum's assistant, impeccably dressed, eyes darting like shadows might be listening. He's in the conference room. Said he's ready. Ready! The word rattled around her head as he led her past muted offices and frosted glass. Her phone buzzed before she touched the doorknob. An internal notice, mandatory meeting allegation review. Her chest tightened as she read the sharp-edged language, breach of confidentiality. Misuse of internal systems. Damaging trust within the organization. At the bottom, Trudy's name stamped like a brand. Ginevra's message followed, don't flinch. They're bluffing, or they're scared. Either way, don't flinch. Ilara silenced the phone and pushed the door open. Callum stood at the far end of the long table, arms folded over a wool vest. He looked smaller than she remembered, tan, faded eyes, bruised with recovery, but fire flickered behind the fatigue. You came, he said simply. I brought something you need to see. He nodded, gestured to the chair across from him. She slid the facts across the table and waited. His expression didn't shift, but his hand curled into a fist. I didn't sign anything, he murmured. I told them not to act until I returned. She did, Trudy, Ilara said. She's shifting assets to her own LLC. You've been cut out of nearly half the operations. Callum accepted the flash drive she offered. No questions asked. I trusted her to keep the lights on, not to take the house. She didn't expect anyone would notice or care. His eyes met hers, regret flickering deep. And yet you did. A knock. The assistant peeked in. Ms. Halbert has scheduled an internal review this afternoon. Legal's already gathered. Ilara rose slowly. She's trying to bury it before you can act. She's fast, Callum said grimly. But she's not faster than the truth. The hallway stretched longer than ever as she walked out, pulse thudding loud in her ears. Downstairs, the review room buzzed. Legal advisors murmured behind clipboards. HR nodded too often, eyes restless. Trudy's name hovered even before she arrived. Ilara took a seat near the end. Strangers all around. No Ginevra, no Walter, just her. The double doors swung wide and silence dropped like a curtain. Trudy entered in slate-gray heels and a silk blouse that whispered money. Her smile was small, tight, designed for funerals or knife fights. She didn't sit. Instead, she circled the perimeter, hands folded like a principal lecturing students who should have known better. Ms. Whitley, she said from behind, we're here because trust is not something to gamble with. You've overstepped. Alara kept her gaze forward, jaw locked. Confidential data accessed, drives manipulated, conversations with third parties not disclosed. Trudy stopped at the front, leaning lightly on the table. That's not ambition. That's sabotage. Alara drew breath to answer, but a raised finger silenced her. I know what you think, that you're peeling back corruption. Her tone sweetened candy over glass. But you don't understand the game. You don't understand legacy or how narratives must be shaped before they spiral. I'm not here for narratives, Alara said evenly. I'm here for the truth. A chuckle. Truth. Trudy tasted the word. What matters isn't who's right, it's who holds the pen. She stepped closer, eyes locked on Alara. You're climbing a ladder not built for you. The higher you go, the clearer you'll see the eyes from the high seat always know who's reaching for the wrong rung. The room held its breath. Alara didn't blink. But beneath the table, her hands curled tight because her phone buzzed in her pocket with a single word, recording. Thick carpet muffled Ilara's steps as she entered the corner boardroom, a folder clutched under her arm. Morning light spilled across the polished table where Callum sat alone staring at the skyline, as if answers hid in the glass and steel beyond. A quiet throat clear drew his attention. He turned slowly, eyes unreadable. I brought the original, she said. A single nod, not welcoming, not dismissing. Taking it as permission, Alara slid the folder forward. Pages rustled as copies, faxes, and a signed memo spread across the surface, his handwriting, his words forbidding any asset transfer during his absence. Callum looked down. Not a twitch in his jaw, not a blink. The silence grew heavy. She waited. His hand hovered, then closed on one page, not to read, only to feel its weight beneath his thumb. You didn't sign those other forms, Alara pressed, leaning forward. Trudy forged your name. She's been shifting money, merging subsidiaries into her own holding. It's all there. No denial. No surprise. Her pulse raced. You knew, she whispered. The door opened with practiced ease. Trudy entered on soft clicks of her heels, smiles sharp enough to cut. Am I interrupting? Callum leaned back. You're right on time. Gliding forward, Trudy lifted one document, skimmed, and set it down as if it were trash. This is the dramatic reveal, a file folder, and a few scans. They're real, Alara shot back. So is Santa Claus, depending on who you ask. I have a statement from Walter, your former head of security. He says Callum gave direct instructions not to... I know exactly what Walter thinks he remembers. Trudy interrupted. The man's nearly 70. His memory has more holes than a thrift store sweater. Chest tightening, Alara stepped closer. You signed off on decisions he explicitly forbade. You built a holding company in your own name, and you're quoting what a sticky note and a bitter retiree. Silence from Callum stood like a wall. Alara turned to him, voice breaking. You said you trusted her to keep the lights on, not take the house. That's what you said. Trudy clicked her tongue. People say many things when they're weak. Cold realization twisted through Alara. You're letting this happen, she told him. You know it's wrong, but you're afraid of the noise. His eyes flicked to hers, once dulled with fatigue. I'll review it, he said at last. With counsel. It's a matter for the board. The words fell heavy as a curtain. Trudy smiled, stacking the papers with effortless grace. We'll take it from here. You've done enough, Alara. No movement. You can go now, Trudy added, soft as dismissal after a child's tantrum. Alara's throat closed, fists clenched at her sides. Words jammed, years of swallowing, smaller ones being brushed off, looked through. Callum kept his gaze down. Somehow her legs carried her out past the elevator, through the wide lobby, where tourists sipped espresso and concierges smiled with plastic poise. Wind struck hard against the concrete steps. Seagulls shrieked overhead, salt cutting sharp in the air. She stopped by the promenade, watching waves crash against the rocks. A family's laughter drifted behind her. A couple argued over lunch. The world spun on, indifferent. One hand pressed to her chest, trying to steady breath. There had been no justice in that room. Ink meant nothing without power to back it. Her voice slipped into the wind, barely audible. How many real signatures live in this house? The hallway carried the faint scent of lemon polish over damp carpet. Hugging the wall, Alara followed muffled footsteps ahead, careful to draw no notice. Two senior managers strode past the corner mid-conversation. She caught only a fragment as they disappeared into the conference wing. Anonymous complaint from a Marla G. sent from a Santa Cruz IP. Legal's been on it since morning. Her steps halted. Marla G. That name hadn't crossed her ears since the first year living with Ginevra when they used it for online returns and fake landlord inquiries. Ginevra's backup alias, always good for staying invisible. A thread snapped in Alara's chest. She pivoted, marched toward the break room, where the light always flickered. Sure enough, Ginevra sat by the vending machine, sipping weak coffee from a cracked paper cup as if nothing had happened. You sent it. No glance up. Guess the boardroom finally opened a door. You used that name. You didn't tell me. Had to. I've been the one out front questioned, threatened, watched. You knew what that would mean and said nothing. I was protecting you. No. Ellara's voice dropped, but sharpened. You were managing risk. Yours, not mine. At last, Ginevra lifted her gaze, hollow and heavy. I've worked in places like this for years. Walk in with your real name, and they already weigh your clothes, your accent, your last name. They decide your ceiling. Shout in your own voice, they hear noise. Whisper with a name like theirs, they hear warning. You should have trusted me to choose that, Allara bit out. I knew you'd charge into the fire. I tried to build a back door while you distracted them. And now they think some ghost cracked their system. What happens when they trace it back to me? You'll still be you. That's what scares them. The silence pressed harder than the buzzing light overhead. Allara shook her head. I stood there telling the truth while you played chess alone. I wasn't trying to win, Ginevra said quietly. I was trying to make sure you didn't lose everything. Well, you missed. Without another word, Allara shoved past the swinging doors into fog-damp streets. Night clung to her skin, cold and heavy. Rain had stopped hours ago, but pavement still shimmered under flickering lamps. Each footstep echoed sharper than the last. At the end of the block, waves hissed faintly. A gull cried thin and tired. She drifted past shuttered shops, salt-stained benches, the boarded-up shack where she and Ginevra once split crab rolls on paydays. Hands trembling, she shoved them deep into her coat pockets, pressing the ache back into her chest. She should have demanded more, should have shouted louder. But all she could picture was that boardroom voices she'd never be invited to match, and Ginevra choosing a mask over her own name. By the time she noticed, she was at the pier. Wind peeled across the water, tossing her hair loose. Town lights fractured wild across the black tide. She perched on the railing. No tears, no anger left to burn, just the steady thrum of everything slipping further out of reach. Another gull's cry, a ship horn carrying faint across the bay. Her phone buzzed once. She ignored it, stayed there staring at waves, breathing in and out beneath the stars, wondering how many lies lived behind the walls she was still trying to break. And whether she had the strength to push again. At 3 a.m., the hotel lobby was a ghost humming with distant compressors and the tick of a grandfather clock no one checked anymore. Allara moved past the concierge desk on measured steps, every muscle taut beneath her coat. The badge in her pocket, still warm from Ginevra's palm hours ago, clicked faintly against her keys. Second floor, West Wing, executive offices. The hallway light above the framed oil portraits flickered once before steadying. She reached the end, paused, and looked back. No shadows moved, no footsteps followed. Card slid. Green light blinked. Lock clicked open with a whisper. Trudy's office waited, two precisely folders lined at perfect angles. Nameplate polished blinds drawn hard against the windows. The space smelled metallic, over-filtered. No hesitation. Fingers skimmed along file cabinet handles until finding the drawer with a silver keyhole. Ginevra once joked it was where Trudy keeps her bones. It didn't budge. Keys rattled from her coat. First nothing, second too wide, third click. The drawer creaked open as though unused for months. Folders labeled in neat script, a black ledger, a thick envelope bulging at one corner. Beneath it, a heat-sealed transfer form stamped confidential. She flipped through and uncovered a folded contract. The signature line, blank, no flourish, no initials. Just a void beneath Callum Drexler. Her chest tightened as she pulled it free. Behind the folder lay another sheet, a printed slip, rerouting funds from the Central Trust to a Nevada shell company. This one was signed not by Callum, by Trudy. Her mother's voice circled back like a warning. Paper doesn't lie. People use it to lie. Papers trembled in her hands. The scent of ink and warm toner, wrapped close like breath in a cold room. At the side table, the printer whirred to life. She ran copies of everything, twice. One set folded into her coat pocket, the other into an envelope from the supply drawer. On the front, she scrawled one name, Callum Drexler. Lights buzzed overhead as she sealed it. From the hall, an elevator dinged. She froze, straining for sound. Nothing, just doors sliding shut again. Envelope hidden, she slipped out, leaving the drawer nearly flush enough to fool a glance. The corridor beyond lay empty, though faint voices drifted through a vent. She chose the back stairs, through the maintenance exit into fog-heavy night. Moisture clung to her lashes, pressed against her cheeks. Boots crunched gravel as she crossed the lot envelope, wrapped in plastic beneath her coat. The horizon hinted at change, not light, yet only the idea of it. At the admin building's drop slot, she slid the envelope in. Air left her lungs in a rush, ribs loosening just slightly. By the time she reached the street, coat sleeves carried the sharp scent of ink and recycled heat from office machines. At the bluff, waves slapped the rocks in stubborn rhythm. Farther out, a fishing boat blinked one yellow light through mist. She didn't stop walking. Fingertips still felt the raised grain of heavy paper. Throat dry, not from fear or fatigue, but from knowing the next step would not wait for readiness. Behind her, dawn crept toward the hotel's glass facade. In her pocket, the copies pressed like a second heartbeat. The leather chairs were already arranged in a half-moon around the walnut table when Alara entered. She didn't sit. Her coat hung damp from the morning drizzle, trailing faint marks across the floor as she crossed the threshold. Callum Drexler sat at the head of the table, no longer bent by silence or fatigue. His posture, upright hair combed a slim folder, closed before him like a sealed verdict. When he spoke, his voice was steady, not loud, not hesitant, just enough. I've reviewed the documents you sent. We cross-referenced them with internal records. There are discrepancies. The board stirred, papers shuffled, someone coughed. A small woman in a gray blazer flipped through her copy with trembling fingers. Then Trudy entered. Not rushed, not shaken. Composed in a deep navy suit that framed authority like a signature. No nod, no apology. Her gaze swept the table as though returning to a chessboard. She reached for the file near Callum. These were stolen, unverified, out of context. No, he replied, quiet but firm. Verified. The trust fund office logs confirm rerouted holdings tied to a defunct Nevada account. That's absurd. Yet the timestamp is there, and the authorization code traces back to your former assistant. He admitted he acted under direction. Trudy's jaw tightened, but her eyes held. Turning to the others, she softened her tone. This isn't about numbers. It's about someone feeling overlooked and needing a stage. Someone shifted uneasily. Alara stayed still, barely breathing. Callum lifted a slip of paper, one she hadn't seen before. A statement from Walter Rennings. He was with me when we sealed the original transfer orders. He confirms I never signed anything new. And you believe him? I believe the evidence. Trudy reached for her glass hand, wavering before steadying. I've given this company 20 years, and in 20 years, Callum cut in. You forgot what we stood for. Or maybe you never believed it. A silence dropped across the room. Finally, he said, Trudy Halberd, you're relieved of duty, effective immediately. No gasp, no protest, just silence settling like dust. Trudy lifted her chin, marking her exit with a dignity no one offered. She crossed the room, heels clicking. The door closed behind her without farewell. Alara remained. This time Callum's gaze found hers. You brought more than evidence. You brought clarity. She gave a single nod. The others looked at her differently, not awe, not warmth, but no dismissal either. Just stillness, as if they finally saw a woman who refused to fade into the background. The meeting unraveled slowly. Chairs scraped, voices murmured, footsteps faded. Callum was last to stand, closing the folder with finality. Alara didn't linger in the marble corridors or glossy elevators. She bypassed the lobby bustle and slipped through the side path, the arteries meant for delivery crews and janitors. Behind the building, weeds clung to cement. Salt crusted the walls where sea air had gnawed for years. She stopped beneath the rusted emergency stairwell. The window was still there, small, warped at the corners. Years ago, she crouched by crates peering through to glimpse silhouettes at catered events, laughter-polished shoes crystal. Rooms where no one looked out. Rooms she was never meant to enter. Tonight it stood ajar. Wind brushed through, tugging her coat. Her palm pressed the frame. The hinge, loosened by time, yielded without fight. From deep within the building, a door whispered shut. Alara eased the door shut, latch catching with a muted click. Dust floated in a narrow beam of afternoon light through the blinds, settling across linoleum and threadbare rug, like ash after a quiet fire. Her old canvas bag hit the ground with a dull thump. She left it closed, standing still, as if waiting for the walls to shift or for time to catch her. The mirror over the dresser hung crooked, a hairline fracture spidering down the glass like a faded scar. Each step closer made the floor groan. Her reflection met her halfway, older, sharper. Not harder exactly, but steadier. The crack cut through the center of her image, and this time she didn't move aside. That mirror had gone untouched the day she left, back when she was afraid to see the girl. No one remembered the one with faded name tags, tips that never stretched far enough, waiting outside locked doors for someone else to open them. But that girl wasn't here now. Her hand brushed a strand of hair back. The fractured line shimmered in sunlight, catching gold, almost beautiful. The radiator coughed heat into the silence. She pulled open the dresser's top drawer. The familiar squeak tightened her throat. Wrapped in a crumpled napkin lay her old Monterey name tag, Alara Whitley. Ink smudged at the edges, pin barely holding. She turned it over, thumb grazing the faded logo. Memory tugged her back to that night. Callum Drexler's weight slumped against her. The stink of whiskey and salt, his voice mumbling a name that wasn't hers before collapsing on crisp white sheets. No cameras caught her hesitation, the way her eyes flicked toward the exit every few steps. No one saw the memory that haunted her mother collapsing on 11th strangers walking past. That night she had stopped. She had moved. No questions, no permission, just action, and almost lost everything for it. The tag no longer looked like something to bury. She slid it into her wallet, not to carry the past, but to honor the ground she had crossed. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, unanswered. Light dimmed. Gulls called, sharp and distant. She pushed the window open, wind rolling in, thick with salt and exhaust, lifting the edge of an unpaid bill. She let it flap. The mirror crack glinted again, not as a flaw, but as a vein of gold. Her mother's words returned, "Paper doesn't lie, but people do. That's why truth takes courage." Back then, Alara hadn't understood. Now she did. Truth wasn't clean, it bruised, scarred, and looked like failure before it resembled justice. Crossing the room, she reached for her coat. Fabric thinned at the elbows, one pocket torn, but she shrugged into it with quiet resolve. No speeches, no declarations. Bag over her shoulder, lighter than before she stepped into the hallway. The air still smelled of boiled rice and too strong cologne, yet it no longer clung to her. The room blazed too bright, every surface scrubbed to a shine. On the center stage, Callum stood in a pale gray suit, not cut to intimidate, but chosen to appear human. Behind him, the screen displayed nothing but the logo of Drexler Properties. No slogans, no clever messaging, just the name. And beneath it, a line that hadn't existed until yesterday: integrity starts on the ground floor. Alara didn't watch the broadcast. She sat cross-legged on a plastic chair in the staff lounge of a training center 3 towns away, sipping burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup that sweated in her palm. The TV above the vending machine was muted. Someone had left it on for the weather. A young intern with a clipboard passed by, glancing with the faint curiosity reserved for names that floated through company emails, but faces left untagged. Across town, Trudy Halberd's name carried heavier weight. The audit pulled apart months of buried transactions, inflated costs, duplicate vendors, a shell company registered to a cousin's address. The woman who once prized perfection over kindness now sat silent under legal review. It hadn't fallen overnight. The building shook before it crumbled. But it crumbled. Alara had watched it unfold quietly, day by day. Receipts matched names, surfaced, timelines collapsed. Callum chose his words carefully. "We owe the integrity of this company to those who see what others miss." His voice carried not authority, but admission. He never said her name. She never asked. Instead, she submitted something else, a 12-page proposal, titled What We Mean When We Say Professionalism. On the last page in bold italics, kindness isn't weakness, it's a standard. She declined every interview, every podcast, every profile. The story belonged to too many now. It didn't need a face. At the annual staff summit, a young man raised his hand mid-session. Sorry, but who proposed the new respect from the bottom-up policy? The facilitator glanced to the back, then answered. Someone who got called the wrong name more times than you'd believe. Chuckles rippled. No one pressed further. Later that afternoon, Alara stepped into the training hall where 10 new hires waited in a semicircle. Some in stiff shirts, some leaning forward nervously. She handed out booklets and sat among them, not in front. This isn't about rules, she said softly. It's about learning not to forget people. No interruptions, no smirks. A woman near the end nodded slowly. Weeks shifted tides. Cameras once hidden above service stations now required approval. Anonymous evaluations could no longer be weaponized. The whistleblower protocol carried a new name. The Whitley Clause, though Alara never signed off on that. Some older managers frowned, most adapted. The ones who whispered sideways now blinked first. She didn't smile back. She didn't need to. One evening, as sun dropped low, she climbed to the rooftop. The city hummed beneath, softened by distance. Hands on the rusted rail, she breathed. No applause, no ribbon cutting, just air moving silence that didn't need filling. From below, a door opened, sending up the scent of copier paper and wax. Fingers curled on the steel, not to hold on, just to steady. A voice behind asked if she was coming down. She turned, nodded once, and let the door close. By dawn, rain had cleared, leaving a sharp salt edge in the morning. Alara stood at the glass doors of a small Santa Cruz hotel, clipboard under her arm, sweater sleeves pushed up. The lobby was modest, half-filled most weeks, warmed by low jazz from a speaker and the smell of scones drifting from the bakery next door. Ginevra had set up shop in what used to be a forgotten gift kiosk. She painted the counter, soft cream stacked her pastries like art, and wore a bandana folded neatly over her hair like it was a crown. No one's looking for cupcakes at 8 in the morning, she'd said that first week. But they stay longer when they find one, Alara had replied. Now the place ran on a quiet rhythm. Not perfect, not polished, but human. Each morning began with open windows and fresh coffee. Staff briefings happened over shared toast and quick jokes in the hallway. The old top-down memos had been replaced by a corkboard of scribbled notes, suggestions, concerns, sometimes a doodle of the night manager as a raccoon stealing leftover bagels. In the kitchen, Leo, the overnight cook who once worked security, offered input on everything from menu pricing to linen suppliers. When asked why, he shrugged, wiped his hands on his apron and muttered, "You asked." That had been the difference. No one here was invisible. At the back of the office, next to the service hallway, sat a table that had become something like the hotel's heart. Folded chairs, a chipped kettle, and every evening before she left, Alara made sure the small overhead bulb was on low but steady. It wasn't protocol. It just meant someone was still awake. That afternoon, a young employee lingered at the edge of the break room, one sneaker tapping nervously against the tiled floor. His name tag read Julian, and he hadn't said much since starting. Alara glanced up from the supply schedule and waited. "My mom's not doing great today," he mumbled. "Would it be okay if I clocked out a bit early?" He didn't give excuses, didn't over-explain. Just stood there, voice soft, as if already preparing for no. Her pen paused mid-page. She thought of her own mother, how helpless it had felt watching the world keep spinning when someone she loved was falling apart. "Go," she said simply. "We don't leave people to carry things alone around here." Relief flickered across his face, quick and honest. He nodded and turned away with an almost apologetic step. The light in the kitchen buzzed faintly. Ginevra poked her head in a few minutes later, flour streaked across her elbow. She carried a new recipe card already smudged at the edges. "Thinking of adding this," she said. "Citrus thyme shortbread. It's weird, but kind of hopeful." Alara raised an eyebrow. "Hopeful? Like it doesn't know it's not a real dessert," Ginevra smirked. "But it shows up anyway." The two of them shared a quiet laugh that filled more space than it seemed to. Later, during the soft hum of evening, guests drifted in from the boardwalk with damp scarves and windblown hair. The bakery lights glowed golden behind the counter, and the small radio played a Nina Simone cover no one remembered requesting. There were no reporters, no plaques on the wall, just the subtle miracle of routine. Ilara stood in the hallway watching the front desk manager, once a dishwasher, walk a guest through the local bus schedule with patient gestures and a highlighter. She didn't interrupt. A breeze slipped in through the side door. Not cold, just present, enough to lift the corner of a flyer pinned to the community board. Behind her, the door to the kitchen creaked gently. She turned, stepped inside, and saw the counter-clean pans stacked, a mug still warm on the prep table. The light above the stove remained on, not because anyone forgot to shut it off, but because someone was coming back. Ilara's journey wasn't about bringing down a powerful woman or proving a point in a boardroom. It was about reclaiming a voice that had been dismissed too often in too many rooms. Sometimes the real courage isn't in shouting over others, it's in standing still when they expect you to step aside. Wherever you are, whatever ladder you're climbing, remember you don't need permission to be seen. Just keep showing up. Let me know if you'd like a podcast-style intro, social media caption, or a visual quote card to go with these.